I'm Rob Dietz.
I'm Jason Bradford.
And I'm Asher Miller. Welcome to Crazy Town, where we live in a van down by the dried-up riverbed.
In today's episode, we're taking out a huge unaffordable mortgage on the housing crisis. What's behind the shortage in housing? Why is it that no young person except a Tik Tok influencer with a 7-figure salary can afford to own a home? While mainstream pundits press for an energy-blind build-out of conventional housing, we propose a surprising change of course.
Hey guys, got a question for you, Rob.
Yeah.
Not you, Jason. I don't care about your family.
That's fine.
Rob, what are your girls doing this summer?
Well, they're all entrenched in the college life, and so you come home from summer, you want to get a college job. We know that all the internships have dried up because there's no funding for that sort of research or nothing like that. So, whatever, they're going to be working at the pool, scooping ice cream, sweeping up, farming,
ice cream
I don't know.
In the pool?
Whatever.
Okay.
Soda, like a soda jerk or a car wash person. And
It's not the 1950s, but,
You're coming up to the drive-through on the roller skates.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, Avi needs to figure out a plan B. He had this big, idea that he wanted to do, and it didn't work out. He applied to live in this influencer house in LA, but his social media follows, his Insta followers weren't big enough, apparently.
it's like real world MTV stuff, living in an influencer house.
What sounds like the stupidest thing imaginable.
You're being very judgmental.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I believe in judgmentalism.
Do you? Okay.
So what house was this in LA?
This is, it's called the House of Gunther. Have you heard about this?
No, but
Okay,
it sounds intriguing.
Say Gunther.
No, Gunther.
Okay. I like Gunther.
Okay. I don't care what you like. This is America, dude. It's
right.
Gunther.
Okay.
So it's quote unquote the world's first dog-funded, influencer-driven content
I hate you.
So here's from the press release. Okay,
Don't hurt me.
this is from the press release.
Be kind.
Quote, Gunther
Be gentle.
the Seventh
Shit.
will start puppyhood in the digital age by investing in House of Gunther, a Los Angeles-based content house composed of Gen Z social media creators.
Can someone pith me? You know what that is? Where you take
No.
you take a probe and you go through the brain of a frog. It's still alive, but it can't feel anything.
I'll happily do that to you if you want. I can shove that microphone right through your brain.
Pith me.
So the Gen Z social media creators will, quote unquote, engage in a social experiment to explore themes of happiness,
Jesus.
wealth, and social behavior.
Okay.
With unlimited resources, never before seen digital reach, and a larger-than-life puppy personality, anything is possible.
Including maximum stupidity.
You lost me at dog funded. What the hell does dog funded mean?
Okay, we haven't talked about Gunther before.
Oh, thank God.
Okay. The only reason
I've lived a
Avi
sheltered
even
life
knew
until
about
now.
this is because I follow Gunther. Yeah. Gunther had a show on Netflix. There are actually multiple Gunthers. Okay, this is I just said Gunther the Seventh.
Okay.
Right?
What happens?
You got to go back in history a little bit, back to the 1990s, right? So Gunther the Seventh's great grandfather is the original world's richest dog. He inherited about $80 million when the late German Countess Carlotta Liebenstein.
Why isn't he in Germany?
He probably has a house in Germany too. She died in 1992, right? So he inherited, he got a trust worth $80 million. And the good news is he had these money managers, people, have to take care of Gunther, including his investments, right?
Right.
So they've grown the trust from $80 million to about $500 million now.
Right.
Solid.
So
This
Gunther's
is
doing
like
well.
the origin of the Pet Smart Wealth Management Fund.
No, that'd be great.
Okay.
You put up different stocks in front of the dog, and you see whichever one he sniffs at or pees on is the one you invest in.
This is how you get rich. You just give your money to your dog.
Right. You might actually do better.
He would do better
than some of these hedge fund guys.
Yeah. Well,
you
no Warren Buffett, but
and you just
pretty
give
good.
them treats, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to give them. They don't have to pay a fee. They don't get a cut. Anyways, a lot of Gunther's money has come from real estate holdings, right? Including. And this is where I feel like we talked about Gunther before, but maybe we didn't. Gunther, one of the Gunthers, once owned a house that Madonna once had on Miami Beach, 8,400 square feet mansion. And, he would sleep in Madonna's old bedroom.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Gunther's living in a material world.
Exactly.
Because he's a material dog.
He's house trained, though.
But Gunther sold that house for $29 million. Right. And then, Gunther's had some setbacks.
Oh.
Gunther tried to buy Nicolas Cage's island, but no go.
Oh,
couldn't happen. That was an island that Nicolas Cage owns, apparently in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why, Gunther the Seventh now is doing this influencer house.
This is his
in
plan
LA.
B, like obvious.
Right. Exactly.
Well,
That's right.
okay. Well, this explains, I think, fully why there's a housing crisis.
Right.
Because,
this is it. This is the source of the housing crisis.
Because we've got German Shepherds like Gunther.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it properly.
Okay.
We have probably corgis out there. There's probably beautiful, like long-haired Dachshunds.
There are a lot of dog influencers online.
Yeah.
We don't know how many homes they own.
They probably own all the homes, all these extra homes.
You don't know how many mountain villas are owned by Bernese mountain dogs.
Totally.
You have no idea how many islands.
St. Bernards.
When people have been arguing for the rights of nature in the more than human world,
Right.
I don't know that this is what they're envisioning.
No, not a domesticated canine.
All right, look.
Or a domestic canine that is worth $500 million.
God, I want to work for Gunther.
When we're talking about the U.S. housing crisis, aside from the dog issue that apparently is causing most of it, I mean, what else is going on here? Are we talking about people living in the streets?
Well, obviously, I've looked at some stats.
Oh, that's surprising, Jason. The numbers, man. Come on, lay them out.
Okay, there's about 750,000 people who are unhoused, and this rotates, but that's about the rate there is in the country. You're talking about the U.S.
I'm assuming it's gone up over years.
Yeah, I think in COVID it was probably one of the peak periods. So, but there's a housing shortage estimate between 1.5 and 5.5 million units. And there's a huge range because how you estimate this is mind-numbingly difficult to understand.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, that's what the economist type people decide is the housing shortage. But even this high end of those estimates may be understating the housing crisis numbers. So there's about 150 million housing units in the United States. Mm-hmm. And if you look at how many are considered of really poor quality, like shoddy, maybe dangerous to live in, and you do some extrapolation, there's probably about 20 million people in situations where it's not a great place. Like maybe it's got mold or the roof leaks a lot, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So not great housing. So we're talking about
substandard.
Between 1 and 5 million housing units short, but also 20 million people probably not living in ideal, housing conditions.
Yeah.
But that's not the only issue, right? I mean, housing is also too expensive.
Right.
It's not just that there aren't enough homes. It's like, there's about 10 million young people. They can't afford to move out of their parents' home. Mm-hmm. This better not be my issue.
Right.
Get them out. Get them out the door. Well, once he gets that influencer job.
Well, but that fell through. I couldn't work my connections with Gunther.
You got to work your dog. Willow could be an influencer. That's how you make it.
Or buddy up with Gunther.
There you go.
Yeah.
Snuggle.
So the average American commutes about 42 miles a day between their job and their home. And so millions of people can only afford a place that's like an hour or more away from their house, right? So we're talking, there's homelessness, there's people that are in substandard housing, and then there's people that maybe their home is just fine, but where they're living, they're either living with their parents and they don't want to be living with their parents, or they're living far from their work.
Right.
Well, of course, the housing shortage and the affordability problems are related, right? Simple economics, supply and demand kind of stuff. By the way, do you guys know that the chief economist at the whatever the U.S. Housing Developers Association is me?
Are you
moonlighting with us, or are you moonlighting with them?
Well, tomato.
You do the rest of this show then,
I bet he gets paid better.
It's not actually me, but same name. So there's
a guy named Rob Dietz.
Yeah, who's like he's the chief economist for the Home Builders Association.
There's probably a couple hundred people named Rob Dietz in the U.S.
I just thought that one was
that's good.
That one was very related to this.
Yes, good job.
A couple hundred people. I think there's a shortage of Rob Dietz.
There needs to be more.
Yeah, clearly. But on the affordability front, I think the idea of the American dream is disappearing. And one of the ways I know this, very anecdotal, but I bought a house kind of in the years after college. It's actually right after graduate school.
Okay.
So I went to college, worked for a while, then went to grad school. Didn't need any money to go to graduate school. That was back in the days where you could maybe get a grant or whatever scholarships. And so then when I came out, I wanted to buy a house. Okay.
All the Gen Zers and millennials listening to this are just like, what the fuck?
Right.
You could buy a house just coming out of grad school?
This is what I'm talking about. So I bought a house in a close-in suburb of Washington, D.C., and it cost me $250,000. I was freaking out at the time. I was like, $250,000. But one of the reasons I bought the house was because it was actually cheaper than renting. I could get a mortgage and pay less in rent. And this was in the year 2000, okay? So 25 years ago. I just looked it up on Zillow and, $776,000.
That's way above average.
That's a 306% increase over 25 years.
Well, it's a big mansion then.
You should have kept the house, dude.
Huge mansion. Yeah, listen to this, 768 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom starter house. It was a Sears home.
Oh, those are
nice.
great.
You order from the Sears catalog and
I've
they
seen those.
bring the materials and assemble the house on site. Yeah. Built in 1923. It had an unfinished basement that actually had a moat in it. So if it rained hard, water would seep down the walls. And
the last episode we did was on, bunkers and survivalism. We had flaming moats there. You should have kept that house and then you could have lit that.
You could have bespoked that place.
Yeah, good point. I should have had some kind of flammable gel that would come out and keep the riffraff out. I mean, that thing, you just think about that. Like
that's a starter home.
Who can have a starter home that's like, $750,000?
Well, I also looked at more stats, and it turns out there are more housing units per capita today than there were in that year 2000. And so people complain about, we're short housing units, but if you divide housing units by population or whatever, there's more units per capita today than in 2000. The problem ends up being really that the rich are too rich, okay? There's an estimated 6 to 8 million second homes and vacation homes around.
So these are, like, if you're dividing houses by the number of people.
Yes, that's the division you would do.
You're basically saying that a lot of them are sitting empty.
Yeah.
And so we have a really high number of houses per person.
That's interesting because I don't hear that number floated around very often in all the conversations about the housing crisis, right? No. Like they're talking about building more homes.
Right.
Which we'll get into. But I don't hear a lot of people talking about the fact that you said 6 to 8 million that are basically not used all the time.
So you go to the St. Louis Fed, tracks all this, and you can just look at these. The math is easy. So I just said, how out of whack are we compared to the historic norm?
Yeah.
And it's like, we've been building houses faster than our population has grown for the last 25 years.
Well, and remember,
it's not a huge difference, but it's still, it's like,
remember when you go asking questions like, how out of whack are we? The whole premise of this show is we're way out of whack.
Okay, so speaking of way out of whack, I got to share this little story. I was at a wedding a month or two ago and met this, lovely couple. Didn't have a lot in common with them. I mean, he literally works in finance in, Manhattan. And we're talking about our kids and what our kids doing. And, they have a daughter and she's also was a freshman in college and she went to University of Texas. And the wife was explaining to me kind of how they figure this whole thing out.
So they're from the East Coast? They're
from New York, right?
Yeah.
So apparently there's a whole cottage industry that's set up to help people find condo.
Condo.
To get residency for their kids.
Yes.
So their kids can get cheaper tuition, in-state tuition. So they basically found this guy through a friend who'd done this, who buys up properties, condos. In this case, it's in Austin. Registers the condo in the name of the kid.
Genius.
Right? So the kid gets residency.
Yes.
Then rents out the property. So because the family has money that they can invest in this thing.
Well, do it in 5 states to hedge.
They should have, yeah. but they don't have that many kids. You need to have a kid to
No,
get
one
the
kid,
residency.
5 states. You don't know where they're going to go.
Right.
Give them options.
So the girl's living at the sorority. She's not even living in this place. They rent it
Right.
out and they get the rental income. This guy makes a bunch of money on
Yeah.
the top, right?
Yeah.
For doing this like turnkey solution for these out-of-state people who have
Yeah.
a bunch of money, right?
Yeah.
And they're netting out actually positive,
Genius.
because of this.
Why didn't
thing.
I think of this?
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing here.
The
Why
free
are we,
market, baby.
We're talking into microphones, trying to make sense of the world when we could be making money out there.
So see, I'm pointing that direction. Okay, I'm pointing north.
Yeah.
Our
There is-
listeners can really see what you're doing.
There's a house at the farm next door that has been rented out to this couple.
Uh-huh.
It's for the same deal, but for like 15 years. The daughter went to U of O, but they did this thing. They just registered and crazy.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to pile on, except that I'm going to pile on here.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Because we're talking housing crisis. There's a looming climate migration crisis that's going to happen. There's all this analysis looking at people are going to have to move. The desert south is going to get too hot. The coastal zones are going to get flooded. So there's going to be a lot of people needing to move at some point. And, there's certain parts of the country that look more attractive, maybe the upper Midwest, and maybe where we are, Pacific Northwest. But all these ideas about migrations due to climate, they're not saying we're going to have to live differently. They're just saying, we'll just move. But one of the things that stands in stark contrast to the idea of climate migration is look up the fastest growing metro areas in the United States. Now, of course, the reporter here of note is U.S. News and World Report. They like to rank everything.
They love ranking. Yeah. I wonder what our podcast is ranked.
Yeah.
By them, yeah.
Yeah. Best 3 morons sitting in a room saying dumb stuff. Yeah, we topped that list. So let's go to the rankings, Jim, and look at the top metro areas
Let's
that are
go,
growing.
Jim.
Yeah. So number 1 is Wildwood, Florida.
Do you think there are any woods there at all?
No. That's wild. Yeah. Number 2, Hilton Head, South Carolina.
Oh, that's going to get blown away.
Yep. Leander, Texas is number 3.
Probably no water.
Palm Desert, California. Speaking of no water.
That makes sense.
Naples, Florida, Casa Grande, Arizona, Zephyr Hills, Florida, San Marcos, Texas, Conroe, Texas, Bonita Springs, Florida. The rest of the 25 are all in the same vein. Like places in Florida and Texas, in the Sun Belt, on the coast. Nothing against these places, but they're mostly hot, coastal, and not going to do well in a warming environment.
Ugh. Now that government agencies and private security firms are emboldened to carry out unwarranted arrest, detention, and extradition, ordinary citizens need countermeasures they can call upon. Self-righteous goon squads are 90% likely to back off and shift attention towards undefended prey if their initial target has visibly armed defense forces. Mercenary Squad is the first and only on-call private security detail for retail consumers. Subscribers to Mercenary Squad pay a low monthly fee, which gives them access to the Mercenary Squad app to pay for services. Simple drop-down menus and calendar functions allow for scheduled force deployment whenever the need is obvious, such as a quinceañera or church funeral gathering. Premium members enlisted in tracking and drone mode can enjoy a comfort knowing a remotely operated strike force is poised in the sky above for immediate call to action with a swipe across the alert button. Mercenary Squad, where the loss of civil rights and fair distribution of public services is a strong business opportunity.
Okay, so obviously we've had this housing crisis, this problem for a long time, but it seems like it's become more of an issue that's being talked about. Like, for example, during the last presidential campaign, Kamala Harris had a proposal for building 3 million new homes. I think she was kind of trying to go right there in the middle of the fairway between some of those estimates of the housing shortage. But, even just taking that amount, okay, which is it's on the low end, I think, of what we talked about. If you think about the cost of that, right? Mm-hmm. So a newly constructed house on average sells for about $665,000, which is Not quite as much as your little Sears.
My
Sears.
2-bedroom, 1-bath
Right.
Sears house.
I mean, they're
700.
much bigger. So
Yeah.
you're getting a deal
deal.
on a new
Yeah.
house. I mean, $665
Yeah,
grand.
congrats to all you college grads and young newlyweds with your $665,000 house.
So, if we said, let's try to enact Kamala Harris's proposal, 3 million new homes, $665,000. I mean, that's about $2 trillion worth of investment.
That's a lot of zeros.
Yeah, that's the about the equivalent of the annual budget for Social Security and national defense combined. Which
Combined? Those are the two biggest.
Yeah, they're always talked about as these crazy huge amounts of money.
Right. Now, this is a one-time outlay versus those being annual. But yes, it's a shit
What
ton.
do you mean one-time outlay? Matthew Iglesias, I don't know, New York Times guy, wants a billion people or a billion Americans?
Yeah, that's true. You're
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Growth opportunity.
Yes.
You're right.
But I can tell you part of why the cost is so much. I just drove through Bend, Oregon yesterday.
Yeah.
Which is vying for the stupidest desert community of Oregon.
Didn't know that
Of
was
Oregon.
Yeah.
Didn't
Of
know
Oregon.
that was a competition, but
I mean, because we talk about Las Vegas is stupid,
Sure.
but Bend.
So we got our own version.
We got our
of
own
this.
version. It's a small version. It's Oregon.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's still absurd there. And I'm driving by like another construction site, and it's about 5 acres. It's just this gravel death zone with 20 massive pieces of equipment. Everything you could have. It was stunning, the variety of heavy equipment there.
it's like one of those Richard Scarry children's books, right? With an excavator and a backhoe and a bulldozer and a little gold bug in a car driving by.
And a giant trencher, and they were trenching these trenches,
Yeah.
and the trenches were full of pipe, and the pipe it was like at every housing site, it was there were these pipes curled up to the surface where you're going to connect all the houses I imagine when I think of these houses like a patient in the ICU. It was like every orifice has got some sort of like
Coming in or
some
out.
sort of tube going in or out.
Yeah.
And if you were to yank any of those or turn off any of the
don't
machines.
yank on catheters, okay?
Yeah.
Let's just be gentle
Yeah.
here.
But every one of these homes is like an ICU patient that the power goes out or a tube gets yanked out. They're done for.
Right,
So-
but this is exactly what the Kamala Harris or the let's just call it the conventional plan. That's
Yeah.
what's being proposed, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You got to build these houses and build them wherever, don't
Yeah.
pay any attention to as long as we can get it done. And you find the nuttiest articles. So there was one in the New York Times by this guy, Connor Doherty, who's sort of a tech business economics reporter, called Why America Should Sprawl.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm telling you, the subtitle to that was the word, he's talking about sprawl, the word has become an epithet for garish, reckless growth. But to fix the housing crisis, the country needs more of it.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't convince me of that actually when I read it.
Let's double down,
He
baby.
didn't convince me. He was unconvincing.
No, it's weird. He goes to the greater Dallas area and he's calling for basically more of the same, go 40 miles north of Dallas and keep building and building
Yes.
and building. And there's nothing in there that would make you think anybody's being savvy with regard to energy or savvy with regard to the ecological health of the area. What was most revealing to me, the article's kind of like eye roll as you read it, but in the comments, one commenter sounds like one of us, is like, how are you going to have water in these places? There's a lot of them are drying down. And his response was, well, we'll need to move to desalinization and wastewater recycling.
Yeah.
It just waves it away.
We're going to suck water from the Gulf of America
Yeah.
and pump it to
Thank
Dallas.
you for calling it by its right
Correct.
term. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I was
so we don't
struggling.
get sued here.
Yeah, exactly.
I was struggling. I was like, what is the Gulf of America?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, that was the opening salvo. Change the name so we can go suck all the water out of it and
Yeah.
desalinate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well-
I think when you do that, you're going to have a pile of salt where you can build more houses.
Right. Right. Well, or you could use that salt for cooking. I mean,
Yeah, it's delicious.
no big deal.
Yeah, preserved meat.
I just realized we're shitting all over the New York Times in this.
We are every single
It's
thing.
good. But
They deserve
man.
it. They deserve it.
if it's there, you got to address it. So another wonderful article in the New York Times is an op-ed by a guy named Benjamin Applebaum.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he's laying out a proposal to build homes on public lands. Literally, that's the title of his stupid article.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm gonna build a home on top of Old Faithful, Yellowstone. It's gonna be on the ground, but then I'll be up in the air, and I'll be on the ground. No water shortage.
No water shortage.
Incredible bidet.
I'm not sure you could drink that water, but yeah. So I guess the Times has been on a bender, right?
Yeah.
With this stuff, because they actually published another piece 2 weeks after that with an article called "Housing on Federal Lands Aims to Ease Affordability Crisis."
Wow.
And I'm just going to quote from that article for a second, okay?
Okay.
Quote, selling about 544,000 acres of developable land, or about 0.2% of the land that the Bureau of Land Management oversees, could result in the construction of 1.5 million new homes on land near existing cities over the next decade. And according to a recent analysis from Edward Pinto from the American Enterprise Institute, who we see eye to eye with on a lot of things.
Bastion of common sense.
Yeah. Another 1.5 million homes could be built over the next 5 decades if new cities are developed near existing metropolitan areas. So we got to get more cities, you know. And again, from the article, quote, David Garcia, the policy director at Up for Growth, a Washington-based research group focused on the housing shortage, said he thought the initiative to build on public lands had a huge potential.
Okay, let's just stop here for a sec. I can't let this pass. There's an organization called Up for Growth.
Yeah, Up for Growth. Yeah.
I hate to call back to really old Simpsons episodes, but I remember one where they were kind of parodying the Super Bowl, and they said, and the halftime show is by Up for People, celebrating the best hemisphere in the world, the Western Hemisphere. Like, up for people, up for growth.
Up for people. I saw one of those shows. Yeah. It's a real thing.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, I think you, Rob, should go get a job. I mean, I know you have this other job working with a realtor or whatever, the housing development thing.
Yeah, that's my in.
Yeah.
That's my in. I could be CEO of Up for Growth, and I'll pass out my old copies of my book, Enough is Enough.
Yeah. You could just do a mea culpa, be like, I had it all wrong, guys. I was, talking about steady state economics. I was a complete fool.
I'll write a sequel, Enough is Enough 2. There's never enough.
Yeah, exactly. You could have a conversion story. This is great.
Oh, yeah, they love that kind of thing. But in any case, so this, Applebaum, he's talking about basically building in the West, right? And we're going to take public lands because it's just empty scrubland, right?
Sagebrush.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Who cares about the other species that inhabit the ecosystems there? It's just...
or the brackish water that's 1,500 feet below the surface.
You're talking about the comments in, I think, one of the other articles, Rob.
Yeah.
I was actually really heartened to read some of the comments from commenters on some of these articles, because a lot of people are like, water, excuse me, water?
Yeah.
Right.
What about the water?
Right.
Excuse me, the water situation? And no answer.
No answer.
Right? No answer to it. My favorite part of that article, the one I was just talking about, is the photo at the top. You don't really need to read the article.
No, you just
the photo at the top is this like construction site in Henderson, Nevada, right? Yeah. And it looks like the backdrop of it is basically from the Arabian Peninsula.
It does look like the Arabian Peninsula because it's got these palms kind of thing.
Right.
Well,
I know.
You don't have to worry about it. Most of the conservatives have evolved from being climate deniers to also being water deniers. It doesn't exist. We don't need it. Just build a structure on sand.
And the water will come.
Desalination.
If you build it, it will come.
Yes.
Right.
Now, the two examples that you guys have gone over ad nauseum are kind of like libertarian, maybe sort of conservative, right-leaning. Again, the favorite
American Enterprise Institute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Up for growth.
Exactly. These are sort of the build people, and they don't really care what you build as long as you build, and they don't care where you build. It could be an inhospitable place like Henderson, Nevada.
I feel like that's what they're after. Let's put this where there's going to be big waves, lots of hurricanes, no water.
But it's cheap to do it there. Now, on the left, there's actually a sort of a counter movement to this a little bit, or they're somewhat aligned on understanding the need for more housing, they say. But it's championed by the book Abundance, Ezra Klein, Klein, Derek Thompson. They're two highly successful writers and podcasters. Klein's at the New York Times, Thompson's at the Atlantic.
Yeah, that's a big book.
Yeah.
It's an abundant book.
Yeah. One bestseller for a week.
It's just more and more pages, every time you open it. I got to say, I'll give these guys, before we shit all over their ideas, which I'm assuming is what we're doing here.
Correct.
I've been to this podcast before.
Yeah.
I think our listeners are probably like, I know it's coming.
Yeah.
But before we do all that. I got to say, I actually appreciate Klein's stuff a lot. He brings on people that he disagrees with, and sometimes he has debates with them. Yeah. He, I think, puts out some really good ideas about stuff. He's a smart guy, articulate.
Yeah.
Derek Thompson as well, in kind of a different field. So it's what makes it actually slightly more frustrating for me. When people who I think have really good ideas and are a pretty rational way of viewing things, like Klein is not a climate denier by any stretch of the imagination, right?
Right.
He's had lots of good things to say about political polarization and all that. He was one of the people that called out very loudly for Joe Biden to step down early.
Totally correct.
So I just want to give the guy some credit, right? Before you shit all over him.
I agree with all that. Now, and this is what is that he's obviously caught up in an eco-modernist sort of liberal vision. And it's not dealing not just about housing, but also they have awful things to say about energy and food and transportation.
By awful, you mean delusional.
Completely delusional.
Got it.
A picture's worth 1,000 words, they say. And this is the case. I've got in here a picture of the cover of the book. I want you guys I'm sorry to do this. I want you to look at it.
Oh, yeah.
That is excellent. It's like a World's Fair gleaming glass tower just like bursting out of the farmland.
On the left. On the right, what's that?
Some kind of oasis with waterfalls and an ibis.
I sort of think it as Dubai and Bambi, right? Like that's kind of what it looks like to me. It's insane. And this is this vision of eco-modernism of like, get everyone packed into these big, sleek cities with renewable energy and then let nature take over. And
well, there's a little bit of farmland, on the edge between. There's like the border between, the city and wild.
A tiny bit.
The cool part is that city is run entirely by 2 wind turbines and 16 photovoltaic solar panels. So no problem.
Okay.
It actually reminds me of my favorite thing ever, Jeff Bezos' presentation he gave when he was launching his space penis company.
Yes.
It's like we're gonna have 1 trillion people living in space, and he had something kind of like this,
right? But in the O'Neill colony,
exactly.
It kind of looked like
Okay,
that's right. So the best description of this vision comes from one of the more critical reviews of the book that questioned kind of the utopian perspective on it. Samuel Moyne, a professor of law and history at Yale, and he actually published it in the New York Times. Quote, "The authors envision clean energy to grow meat in labs, more food on smaller plots of land, less work for more pay, and Mach 2 jetliners that run on synthetic fuel to ferry people during the free time won for leisure. What's not to like?" That's a little ironic there.
I'm just nodding my head. What's not to like? It's awesome. I can't wait.
Yes.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Well, look, a lot of the argument that Klein and others are putting forth from the liberal side, it kind of sounds like they're critical of the environmentalists, of this anti-growth, anti-innovation, not in my backyard. These people just constantly getting in the way of projects. Maybe, they're doing it out of good intentions, but, whatever, slowing the wheels of progress. And Klein's really starting to say that the liberals, the Democrats are putting up too many roadblocks and we need to remove those blocks. The example that he's harped on some is this idea of bureaucracy. They were talking about in San Francisco, they built a public toilet and it cost $1.7 million, right?
Yeah.
And the reason was that, 9 or 10 agencies got involved. There's a big set of public comment periods. There's environmental reviews, all this stuff.
And you just crap in a corner on the street and no one cares, actually.
That's actually in San Francisco also happening.
You just nail a plastic bag to a telephone pole. Yeah. Hardly costs anything.
Just squat a little bit.
DIY.
But, the argument makes some sense. Like your bureaucracy gets out of control and it costs a lot.
We talked about that, over-complexification of things.
Well, that's the thing. They never mention complexity. Like, none of these people mention that.
But here's the kind of kicker of it. They sort of give this false choice like you give to your 2-year-old, you can either eat your green beans
Yes.
or you can eat your squash,
Right.
They say that if liberals do not want Americans to turn to the false promise of strongmen, they need to offer the fruits of effective government. I mean, fine, effective government, yeah, we're all for it, but it's not like building $2 trillion worth of housing. It's either that or some strongman's gonna rule the day.
Well, I go back to complexity that nobody really understands what to do. And a lot of the client guests, they would argue about how do we do this? Not what we do. Like what we do is fine. We need to have this, the Bambi in Dubai world. But they're always arguing about this. It drives me crazy. But liberals seem to love this. It offers this way for Democrats to offer some kind of populist solution set, right?
Well, and there is a problem there. And let's give, liberals, progressive Democrats credit for actually wanting to solve problems, maybe just out of political necessity or because, they actually have some values, So there are probably some good intentions there. But you're right. I mean, they've gone on this tour, this abundance tour. And, Klein, again, to his credit, has brought on critics. He did a conversation on his podcast with Shokat Chakrabarti, sorry for mispronouncing the name, and Zephyr Cheetout, kind of debating the argument in abundance. But it's crazy because what they're arguing is about what is the cause of the housing crisis, not necessarily his vision for how you solve it or his vision for the future, right? They're pissed about excusing away the way that centrist Democrats have allowed housing inequality to persist, not addressing that issue.
The Gunther problem.
Exactly. They should have. Gunther's too cute to really make him the poster child for this. True. But they're saying that
poster puppy.
Poster puppy.
Thank you. Specious.
They're basically challenging him for excusing away the role of the wealthy, for not talking about
oligarchies and
globalization enough as a big part of the problem. But they're all on board with this kind of green vision of urban utopia.
Well, as Jason quoted, what's not to like? Mach 2 jets for my leisure time. We love hearing from listeners who are doing good work out there in the world. And we hope that maybe you'll find some inspiration in examples like this one. The folks at Holmberg Homestead left a comment on Spotify after an episode we recorded about eco-modernism in the food system. They say, "How very refreshing to listen to a podcast that actually understands small-scale, diverse, multi-species farming. We not only raise much of our food with very low inputs, we have extra to give to neighbors and the community food pantry." Well, thanks for the inspiring work you're doing at Holmberg Homestead. We recognize not everyone has access to farmland or skills in farming, but everyone can follow their lead and be giving to their neighbors and community. If you're doing something in service of people in the planet, something that helps us change direction toward sustainability and justice, please let us know. Leave a comment in your podcast app or get in touch with us directly by emailing crazytown@postcarbon.org. That's crazytown@postcarbon.org.
All right, guys. I love just lamenting and bitching and moaning and all that stuff. But I think we should actually start talking about, here we are giving these guys a hard time for solutions to the housing
air quotes around solutions there,
crisis that we think are BS or stupid. So we got to put up or shut up.
Totally.
Right. So let's talk about more realistic, maybe more sustainable responses. Mm-hmm. And maybe we start with some low hanging fruit.
Okay.
And here's one. Pretty obvious, but you don't see it talked about very much, which is let's just tax the ever living crap out of second homes, vacation homes, or homes owned by corporations, private equity funds that, buy up a whole bunch of stuff and, try to maximize profit through, rental
market
income
manipulation.
And all that stuff. Let's just tax the living shit out of that stuff.
Great idea.
Yeah. good luck overcoming the power of those corporations and getting that
but
through. But I agree. Totally
should be
agree.
part of the conversation.
Yes.
Right.
Another one is we could use the existing housing stock and fill them up with more people. Like we talked about earlier, you've got a lot more square footage per capita than at any time ever in American history. Yet we have this scary housing shortage. So this also combines with, to solve another problem, talk about multi-solving, as our friend Beth Solwin would say, is there's also a loneliness epidemic in America. And so you put more people in houses, you could help with that too. Our friend Vicki Robin has done that in her home. She rents out part of it, kind of set it up so that person could have autonomous living space inside her house. And there's been some effort to make this easier to do.
Yeah.
It used to be kind of, no, that's a single family house. You can't do that.
Right.
Some places are lightening up those regulations, and you can have accessory dwelling units or ADUs on your property. Just ways to get more people in the spaces that we're already inhabiting.
Yeah, I think that's all great. But honestly, guys, I'm sorry, but it doesn't go far enough. What if I told you, though, that I have a proposal that can solve the housing crisis affordably, give people meaningful work with little or no commute, and repair landscapes harmed by industrial agriculture and other historical abuses?
You sound like a great politician. Are you getting ready to run for office here?
Well, this idea actually came up in the context of a recent sponsor of ours on the show, known as the Shire Property Development and Realty Group. So I really love these guys.
Yeah, they're great.
So what I'm proposing is the Modern Shire Project, and this is a way to build rural villages that allow the unplugging from urban metabolism and industrial production of food and junk consumer goods. So imagine building with local and natural materials and people making a livelihood in place, growing their own food, making their own basic goods in community, and repairing the ecosystems they live among.
Okay, so I'm willing to hear you out, but I got two critiques.
So far, only two?
One, you sound like an infomercial, if anybody even knows what that is anymore. But what if I told you that I could solve everything and you could be rich?
Okay. I'll tone that down.
I'm sold, dude. I don't know what you're talking about.
My second critique is I think you have a real proposal that's based on a fake ad that you came up with a couple of weeks ago, which is quite honestly scaring me a little bit.
Wait, are you telling me that we don't actually have these sponsors?
What is he talking about?
We've been doing this for 5 years, and I didn't realize.
You haven't audited the books?
Been fake sponsors this whole time?
Well, I set up a meme.
Jason.
I set up a meme coin, and anyway.
Okay. All right. Well, what are the advantages of your Shire build out?
Now, we don't have time to go through this in the podcast, but I did the math on this and have an article at resilience.org. Resilience.org.
Yeah, look up Jason Bradford. You'll find all kinds of wisdom.
Okay, so to build not just the housing, but also purchase farmland and set up commons infrastructure like barns and equipment for community self-provisioning ends up being about $70,000 per person instead of what we do now, which is about what the proposals are.
The $2 trillion build out of conventional housing.
That's about $290,000 per person. If you do the math on the conventional housing proposals. So it's $70K versus $290K.
So that's like a quarter of the price per person of the conventional approach.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is like, we're talking about, like you said, $2 trillion investment for this 3 million, unit housing shortage. And I can do this. Well, the Shire property.
Right. You could do this yourself.
This is going to cost under $500 billion. It's a bargain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you wrote that article, as usual, I was your editor.
It was amazing. Only had 400 things to change, I think.
A lot of helpful comments. Right? You also went into the ecological footprint of these two different development models, the Shire model and the conventional. Can we call it the Mordor model?
Conventional Mordor, yes. I like that.
So the Shire has a really light footprint, definitely within one planet living. People are in relationship with their local ecosystem. The conventional Mordor housing is stomping an ecological footprint. It's 5 times
But it
too
comes
big.
with the eye of Sauron.
Yes, it's beautiful gleaming orange.
Orcs.
You don't have to heat your home anymore. This flaming eye provides all the heat.
Yeah.
So let me get this right. So a quarter of the price.
Yeah.
And comes with built-in community, less vulnerable to the breakdown of modernity.
Yeah. You're living with a tenth of the material and ecological harm. In fact, you're doing ecological repair in this scenario.
Now, are only people with hairy feet eligible?
No, I think we have to be open nowadays to allowing people without hairy feet into the Shire.
Don't get back into the speciest thing. You've already done that with the dogs and the
right.
We're letting anybody.
Clearly,
in here.
Dogs wouldn't be allowed. I mean, talk about hairy feet.
So you're saying Gunther can't buy into the Shire?
I mean, I think we probably need something to help herd the sheep.
Yeah.
So, border collies.
Oh, it's a
Gunther has a whole new lease on life.
He's a German Shepherd, right?
Correct.
Instead of herding influencers to take stupid selfies, he can actually herd sheep.
Yes.
Wow.
Have more happiness for Gunther too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I have some experience with this sort of living. I lived for 12 years in a co-housing community, intentional community, even call it an aspiring eco-village right here in Corvallis. That place was expressly designed to fit more people into a smaller piece of land and to have a smaller ecological footprint, to de-emphasize the car, de-emphasize the consumer goods thing, use less energy, compost more, all of that kind of stuff, and have that tighter knit community. I used to host music night where we would sing really bad guitar songs. And,
I think I remember singing badly at those places, those things.
A lot of fun.
A lot of fun. And I think that's right. That's kind of what I'm talking about. And it's a beautiful place. But I also think, I'm thinking we eventually have to go even further, or maybe sooner than later. And I'm imagining a little bit even what I experienced when I was in my travels. And a couple places come to mind, including this little village named Penjuku in the Solomon Islands, which was, they have like tin roofs. That was sort of the only industrial aspect. And they will have sometimes outboard motors, but dugout canoes, like they're building from wood that they harvest, in the area. It's just shockingly wonderful, beautiful little place. And so I think even the natural material side of things would be fascinating because it can decompose, right? We talk about what can decompose gracefully, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when you speak to sort of average American on the street, they might have trouble making the leap to maybe envisioning themselves there. So I think it's always instructive to think of, what are the ways we can bridge that? And our friend Nate Hagens recently recorded an episode on his Great Simplification podcast where he interviewed this guy, Alexis Ziegler, who's affiliated with Living Energy Farm in Virginia. And I thought that was a good example. They have this off-grid farm community, lots of people living there. They grow almost all of their food. They generate electricity right there and have it very simplified.
Yeah.
And he was suggesting this would be a good way to set up residential communities in places that don't have a lot of infrastructure. They use like 3% of the energy that
incredible.
A typical U.S. household use. And
3%.
Yes, 3%.
And they seem to have pretty happy lives. They are really good at building community and just getting on with life without burning and using so much stuff.
Now, land use laws, and so this is interesting, talking again about the laws and regulations get in the way of doing this. Like they allow stuff like the travesty I saw in Bend, or what is being proposed around the nation. They allow those travesties, but they don't allow people to go back to the land as easily in community on highly valuable farmland, right? I think we need trials and variances to allow people to reoccupy highly productive landscapes and remove the machines a bit and go back to these places. There was, some years ago, there was an interview we passed on that Vicki Robin did with Jane Davidson of the Wales One Planet Development Law. And so I think more stuff like that is required in places like highly
That was about trying to support people to get back onto the land, right?
Yeah, the idea being that you could buy a large rural farm property and actually re-inhabit it. Because a lot of these places... If you don't just run it with machines, you don't have housing on these anymore. They're not allowed. It's try to protect them from development.
Yeah.
But the idea is that, no, we need to actually open them up to certain kinds of development.
My friend Kieran, this is exactly what he did. He and a few others bought property in Wales,
Oh,
farm
wow.
property, and
Really?
they're living there together. And yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Actually works. That's episode 37 of
Oh,
Crazy
That
Town.
was a long time ago.
Yeah, discounting the future and climate chaos.
No, I just need to do a little tweaking here, okay?
Okay.
Because we're talking about bridging from the kind of the current paradigm,
Yeah.
to something that's coming next. And I think we have a real need to fast track this. I think there's also opportunity for making some money here, Jason.
Well,
so,
yeah.
I mean, you tried for a while there. You tried to create this new institute, Tipsy,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And I think
Wonderful.
you were trying to
Wonderful
raise.
failure.
Well, you were trying to raise what, $350 billion
Yes.
for that?
Yes.
Not very successful.
Thinking small. I mean, we're in the trillions now.
So I think
Yeah.
I think we got to write this up.
Okay.
Put a pitch deck together. We can go and raise what? How much do we need for this build out of
About half a trillion, 500 billion. Is this
500
big?
billion.
Is it be bigger than Tipsy, but more impactful?
Right. I think you got to corner this market.
Okay.
You got to patent the hell out of it, Jason.
Yes. We got to get Gunther on board.
So we need to go pitch Gunther.
Yeah, because he's got money.
I got treats that Willow loves. If I keep them in my pocket,
Like liver.
yeah, maybe he'll come up and like lick me or whatever, or sniff me, and maybe that'll be a good indication for the people who manage his money.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be enough to go around the dog influencer circle,
Right.
but we could start there, and then maybe the next ring out is going to all the Lord of the Rings fans.
Okay.
Now,
yeah,
see if we can get them to invest in this thing.
So when I put this out, I thought, God, this is really edgy. Like, who's insane here?
Yeah.
I'm talking about like living like hobbits in the
Right.
Shire as a solution. But then,
Well, it's not any more insane than building, housing units in the fucking desert on public land and then hoping that water's going to show up
Well,
someday.
I hope
Exactly.
it's more sane than
it's
doing
more
that.
sane. So yes, Gunther should back this big time, Gunther.
All right.
You're a good boy.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you want others to consider these issues, then please share Crazy Town with your friends. Hit that share button in your podcast app or just tell them face to face. Maybe you can start some much needed conversations and do some things together to get us out of Crazy Town. Thanks again for listening and sharing.
Crazy town, da, 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 crazy town.